Guys, welcome to the UFC Fight Night 125 breakdown. We're going to take a look at the fights coming up this weekend. And also in this episode, we'll take a look at the fights and recap what happened this past weekend at UFC on Fox 27, which was headlined by Jacare and Derek Brunson. And the fights coming up this weekend are going to be headlined by Eryk and Lyoto Machida. So you got one of those cases of these new guys rising up through the ranks, meeting one of these old, seasoned, tough veterans in Lyoto Machida. And we'll take a look at that fight. We'll work our way up. There's 6 fights on this main card, so it's going to run late. But we'll work our way up, and we'll talk about that fight at the very end. Let's talk about some headlines that I saw. The first one I want to talk about is Khabib saying that he's going to make Conor McGregor wait if he defends or gains the title, I should say. I don't know if it's going to be for a vacant title or an interim title. Like Dana hasn't said he's going to strip Conor. But if Khabib beats Tony for whatever belt that he gets, he said he's going to make Conor sit and wait on the sidelines. And if the UFC didn't have an event booked in Russia, and if you didn't know that Conor was the biggest star in MMA, you might believe that. But you know for a fact that if Khabib wins and is offered the chance to defend or unify the belt in Russia in front of his home fans against Conor McGregor, who is the biggest draw in MMA without a doubt, you're crazy. He's never going to pass up that payday and that opportunity, especially because I think Khabib truly believes that he's the best in the world, and he very well might be. So he's not thinking he's going to lose that fight. Like, he's going to want to take that fight in Russia and take it to Conor in front of his people. So I don't believe that for a minute. If Conor wants to fight, as much as it sucks for as much as it sucks for Tony and Khabib, Conor still runs that division. Like, people care more about watching him fight than these two. The general public, that is. I know the MMA community is probably getting really sick of watching Conor sit out, and they probably really are interested in watching Khabib and Tony fight. I know for damn sure I am, but I'm just saying on a grand scale, Conor's much more popular than them, and he's going to be who dictates when the fights happen. Because he kind of dictates their pay, right? Like, there's going to be a lot of pay-per-view buys for that fight. Next thing that I want to talk about is Roy Jones Jr. saying that he would come out of retirement to box Anderson Silva in a heartbeat or something like that. Well, no shit you would. You just saw Floyd Mayweather work Conor McGregor in a boxing ring, and you know that you're going to do the same thing because you've already saw it happen. You weren't the one who went out and did it first. Like, you've already seen the result, and you know that there are advantages that you can take against a guy like Silva who has practiced MMA as opposed to boxing. I think boxing is a beautiful sport, but when you simplify the art, like when you boil all of the arts down to one category, like throwing your fists, like when you only let punches happen, you can get so good at doing that one thing. You can spend so much time and effort on your boxing and get so good at it, whereas in MMA you have a ton of different disciplines to worry about. Like, you have to be more well-rounded. So obviously Roy Jones Jr. is going to beat a guy like Anderson Silva. Like I said, we already saw it happen with Floyd and Conor. And Floyd's a pretty historically defensive boxer, and you saw what happened when he started letting his hands go against Conor. Like, Conor was just outclassed. And he held his own or whatever for the first few rounds and looked good, but you get the feeling that was like Floyd's feeling out process. So let's not do this again. We've seen it. It was a huge spectacle. Let's not fuck things up here. Like, let's just keep people in their lane. And finally, I want to talk about the DC and Stipe fight, because this is a really interesting fight, because DC was undefeated as a heavyweight before dropping to light heavyweight. And he's only ever lost to one man at light heavyweight, and that's John Jones, who is probably the baddest motherfucker who's ever walked planet Earth. This is a really interesting fight because Stipe has a wrestling background, so he'll be able to maybe present DC with some problems as far as stuffing the takedown goes. But DC, if I was going to give the wrestling advantage to one or the other, I'm going to give it to DC because he's got that Olympic caliber experience. But Stipe knocked a lot of people out, man. I think he has 18 wins now and 13 knockouts. So if he lands on... I think the way he knocks people out isn't quite as impressive as Ngannou, and that's why people kind of slept on his power going into this last fight. But man, Stipe, he hits you, and it might not look as devastating as when Ngannou hits people, but it puts people to sleep. Look at how he knocked out Fabricio Verdum while moving backwards. Like, it takes a lot, and there wasn't a lot behind the punch. I mean, he can just generate so much power in such a short space. It's incredible. So DC's going to have to be careful when he tries to get in close and try to get in the clinch, because kind of like Ozdemir does that too. He can generate a lot of power in those tight spaces. But and look what DC did to that. I mean, I'm not saying he's going to do that to Stipe. I'm just saying DC's a smart fighter. Probably second best. I mean, I think definitely the second best light heavyweight ever. A lot of interest in seeing that fight, and I think it's a good thing, because I think it's a legitimate fight. Like, it's not like just some super fight that they're making. It's a legitimate fight. Like, it's a really, like, this isn't just some, like, GSP coming out of retirement to fight Bisping, who is 80 years old and won the belt back. This is a legit competitive fight. Not that that wasn't, that's not what I'm saying. But these are two guys at the top of their food chains. And it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. Moving on to, well, let's move on and recap real quick what happened this past weekend. So I went 4 for 4 on my picks, but I actually think I got 2 of them wrong. Like, I don't agree with the judges' decisions on these. And the first one is Drew Dober. I didn't think he won. I think I can understand why you gave him the win. I just personally didn't think he did. Like, I thought Camacho had a really good third round, really impressed me with his toughness, and looked really good on his feet. Like, threw some really crisp combos at a guy who, at least on paper, has a way better striking background than you do. And he looked like Camacho looked good. But they gave Dober the win. He even said after the fight, he's like, I'm not even sure I agree with that. Next, Gillespie dominated. When he gets to mount, he's just so good. He's really good, first off, at finding the path to mount. And then when he gets there, he's really good at not letting you go and doing work there. I mean, his pressure is constant, and he just overwhelmed him. And he's the guy to really look out for at 155. But then again, who can't you look out for at 155? Like, that division is so stacked with talent, like, all the way through I say this almost all the time, but you can mix and match anyone in the top 15 to 20, and you've got a hell of a fight on your hands. That division just it's so rich with talent. And guys like that just keep coming into it, too. Like, it keeps getting fed. He's got to watch out for, though. Like I said, I'm biased towards him because I grew up in Western Pennsylvania, but he's definitely a guy to keep on your radar. And then Andre Fili walked away with the win over Bermudez that I didn't think he earned. And I think, if I'm remembering right, in this fight, Fili landed a couple takedowns, which might have made the difference. Like, he had a couple of really well-timed shots. I think Bermudez got back to his feet, and I thought Bermudez won this fight. But I really think that that might have been the deciding factor for the judges when he was doing those well-timed shots. Like I said, it didn't hold him down, but I just think when the judges saw that, they were like, oh, okay, like, Fili's kind of taking down the wrestler, the guy who we thought were going to... Like, I think that might have played into why you saw Fili get the decision. I'm not sure. It was a good fight. I'm not saying... I don't want to say he didn't earn it, but I personally would have went the other way. And the last fight was Jacare, which I was kind of right, kind of wrong on this one. Like, the reason that Brunson lost, in my opinion, is because he got wild with some punches that opened him up to some counters. And I know he didn't get submitted, and, like, Jacare didn't take him down, but he was getting tagged with a couple shots that I really thought aided the knockout. Because when Jacare threw his leg up, like, it hit Brunson. Like, Brunson had his guard up, and it just, like, knocked him back, and you could tell that, like, that's probably a shot that wouldn't have knocked him out normally, I don't think, if he didn't take some of the shots that he took earlier in the fight. And then Jacare just, like, eerily, right, like, walks over to him, stalks him, and just calm as ever, just gets the finish. And I don't know, impressive, but I really think Derek Brunson's got to calm it the fuck down. Like, I think he gets nervous, and when sometimes that can be a good thing, but I think he gets I don't know if nervous is a word, but excitable. Like he sees openings and he really goes for it, which is good. It pays off. But when you start fighting these high level guys like Jacare, those openings close quicker than he's used to, and he's getting countered. And man, it's a rough loss for him, but hopefully one that he learns from and comes back, because I know he didn't lose the exact same way as the first fight, but I think it was for the same reason. He kind of threw some combos that let him get tagged, and it really hurt him later in the fight. But yeah, went 4 for 4. That never fucking happens. And like I said, I didn't even agree with 2 of them. But should have bet on that card. Should have parlayed them. Every time I do a parlay, though, like I'll parlay a couple fights together or something like that, and one guy will lose or something. Like when I have a really good feeling, it'll be a huge upset too. It'll be like, oh, that's the guy that's guaranteed to win. When I went to Vegas, I bet one time for the Conor and Aldo fight. I bet on, who did I bet on? I had a parlay with like Max Holloway, I think. I can't remember who it was. Point is, I picked everyone right except for, I think it was Kevin Lee. And he was just like, everyone was raving about him. And I picked everyone right. And Kevin Lee let me down. All that hype around him, like he was a huge favorite. I was like, oh man, this is like the lock guy. If the other guys win, I'm going to win the whole bet. And nope, did not work out that way. Anyway, let's move on to this main card. Like, there's 6 fights on these, and these damn fights are already long enough. You know what I mean? They already last, like, I don't know what time it starts, but if it starts at 10, you're going to be up till 2 in the morning now. And there are commercials and everything, so they can't just, like, zip it right along. Anyway, first fight is going to be a middleweight bout between Thiago Santos and Anthony Smith. Santos has won his last 3, and he's beat Jack Herman. I don't even know. I can't even read my own handwriting. I took some notes on, like, I don't like to write down a lot, but I like to write down the last 3 guys they fought so I can read them off to you, and I can't even read their names. Jack Hermanen, Gerald Marchenko or something, and Jack Marshman. And he's actually got sorry about that. He's got 3 consecutive KOs though. And he's fighting Anthony Smith, who's 28-12, and he's also coming off 3 knockout wins in a row over Hector Lombard, Andrew Sanchez, and Elvis Mutapchik. I think that's how you pronounce his name. But he's a guy who, he's got like 40 fights. He's like 28-12. So, and you can see it on his face too, like he'll get in some trouble in the octagon, and his composure, I mean, like you can tell, like he's working his way through things and he might be breathing a little bit hard, but he stays pretty calm. Like you can see it on his face, like he's been there before. He knows how to get out of that deep water and get back to shore. Hector Lombard was an interesting fight for him because he's a pretty long guy for middleweight. Like I think he's like 6'4" or something like that, and he really telegraphs his shots. And early in the fight, I think Lombard was able to take advantage of that because he was so fast. Like he would see the shots coming and get in and counter. And as the fight wore on, Lombard's a thick guy. He carries around a lot of muscle on him. I think he started to fatigue a little bit, and that's where you saw Anthony Smith kind of take over. And he's kind of, I don't want to say a patient fighter, but like on the ground off his back, I've seen a couple times where he's just like sitting there trying to, I don't know if he's trying to regain his energy or if he's just like got some strategy, but he's not like insanely active off of his back. He's pretty patient down there, and he'll wait for openings and try to get back to his feet. But yeah, and if you watch his fight against Hector Lombard, he's like, do you know my name yet? Do you know my name yet? At the end of the second round, and was talking shit on him until he knocked him out in the 3rd round. So he's a little bit crazy too. Like I was watching him in his corner, and he kind of was like, his corner's constantly yelling at him like, listen to me. He must zone out. They must have to bring him back to earth or something like that. So the biggest thing for me in this fight for Thiago Santos is going to be, if he's going to win, which I'm picking Santos. I think that what he has to do is get started early. And I don't want to say coast, like I don't know if that's the word for it, but don't gas yourself out too much from the first round and let Smith start taking over when you get tired, because that's what he tends to do to people. I think that you need to stay moving, but at a constant and consistent pace. And I think I don't like someone to get knocked out in this fight. And I know that they're coming off knockout wins. Like both of them are on 3-fight knockout streaks. But I really think that this fight's going to go the distance, and you're going to see Santos kind of... And I think it'll go the distance either way. But if Santos wins, it'll be because he set a good pace. And he was just kind of outclassing Smith and staying consistent, a little bit faster than Smith. And then he countered well. And like I said, Anthony Smith, I think he telegraphs a lot of shots. And I think a guy like Santos is fast enough to react to them. But you got to keep that pace up. If Smith wins, I think it'll be because Santos started to fade. And then you might see a knockout or a finish in the third. But my prediction is that it's going to go the distance and Santos wins. But if Smith wins, I could see it being by a late knockout or a really dominant third round. Let's see. Yeah, I think the biggest advantage Smith is going to have, and this is probably why he gets these late finishes, is just his experience. I mean, having 40 fights helps a lot. But Thiago Santos has a lot of UFC experience, which maybe is even more important. Anyway, let's move on to the next card, or the next fight on the card, which is a heavyweight bout between Marcelo Golm and Timothy Johnson. Timothy Johnson lost to Junior Albini by knockout, that guy who wears the diaper and shit and calls himself baby. And then he lost, or before that, he won against Daniel Omilanchek, split decision, and then he lost to Alexander Volkan, who I believe knocked out Stefan Struve. I think that's right. He lost that to a split decision. And Junior Albini and Volkan were both, it was their UFC debut was against Timothy Johnson, and he lost both of them. So he's going to have the advantage in that this is going to be Golm's second fight in the UFC, and he has 6 fights. But I think he's ranked like 15 right now, and I'm having a hard time picking Johnson over Golm because Golm has 6 wins, and I think all of them are first-round knockouts. Like, his hands are so impressive, and he's really explosive. He's got a lot of power, and I don't think Timothy Johnson will be able to deal with that. Johnson will do this thing, too, where he'll kind of, like, throw a blitz at you, kind of like Lyoto Machida, but not really. It's a little bit different. It's not, like, the same style exactly, but he does that, like, blitz real quick where he comes at you. And I look for Golm to take advantage of stuff like that, just a little... I think he's going to find an opening and clip him. And also the fact that Timothy Johnson has lost 2 of his last 3 fights, and 2 of those guys were debuting in the UFC, so I'm starting to think he's got some bad newcomer karma or something. So for that reason, I'm going to take Golm. And I think Johnson will get out of the first round, but I think he's going to get knocked out in the second. If Johnson wins, he's got to rely on experience, stay calm, kind of weather the storm, and then see what happens to this kid in the second and third round. Like, you might maybe he'll punch himself out. Maybe you can, if you can weather that storm, we'll get to see what this Golm kid is really made of as the fight wears on. So this is a fight to keep your eye on, because Golm's a young, up-and-coming prospect. So, and like I said, Johnson's a top 15 fighter. I mean, not that heavyweight's the deepest division in the world or anything, but he's he's not a contender, but he's top 15 talent, and we're going to get to see Golm against a guy who's ranked and see how he does. Next fight is going to be Desmond Green versus Mikel Pereira, and I think this fight's at lightweight, and I think that Desmond Green has fought at welterweight before. I could be wrong about that. I thought he did. Anyway, he's got 2 UFC fights so far, and he's got a win and a loss. And I thought he lost the first one, to be honest with you, against Josh Emmett in Buffalo. I was actually there for that fight, and I was sitting in front. Well, they just came up and sat behind us. It was Desmond Green's, I don't know if it was his wife, fiance, girlfriend, or whatever, but him and his daughter. His fiance and his daughter. And they were just screaming. She was like, "Daddy, Daddy!" Like, I was like, "Oh my God, it's kind of emotional." Like, his little girl's like freaking out while he's in there fist fighting someone. And when the fight ended, I was like, "Oh no, these people are going to be crushed because Green definitely lost the fight." And then they handed him the decision. And he's from the Buffalo area, so I think he got a little bit of help from the fans getting loud when he did some things right. Because he wrestled at the University of Buffalo. He's a D1 wrestler. But yeah, I thought that we were going to have to deal with like some tears and stuff, and we got lucky because the judging sucks. But Pereira, he has won his last 3. He missed weight for the one. Oh, man. Missing weight is such a... Like, you got to worry about him having that problem again, because when you miss weight, first off, you didn't go through the same hell that the other fighter did to get to the weight that they need to get to. And not only that, but you have like a little bit of an advantage, right? Because your body didn't deplete itself as much. So I think they win more than half the fights that happen like that. Like people who accept fights against guys who missed weight, I think most of the time they end up winning. The guy who missed weight ends up winning. I could be wrong on that. I'd like to look up a stat for that because I'm not completely sure if that's true, but I'm almost positive that it is. But anyway, this guy is a black belt in BJJ. He's 36 years old. He's an animal. He's only lost 2 fights, so he's a guy to watch out for. He's tapped out 3 of his last 4 opponents by north-south choke, which is a rare choke to get a hold of in the UFC, and he's got that like body for it though. Like his body, when he cranks on your neck, like his build lets him really sink it. He's like short and compact, and his build lets him really sink his hips into the floor and stuff when he starts going around to finish that choke off. So I would look for him to try to take... I know Green's a wrestler, but I would expect Pereira to try to put him on his back. And I think when he does, you're really going to see Pereira. Like he's really active trying to pass the guard, and he's really good at it. I think you'll see him slice through the guard of Green and dominate a win on top. I'm not sure if we'll be able to get a submission against Green, but I think he'll do a lot of holding him there and dominating him there. And I think that if Desmond Green can get Pereira to the ground, he's going to struggle keeping him on his back, and you might lose a transition or something that Green ends up on his back. Green's best bet in this fight might be to keep it standing. Looking at his background, you might not think that, but I really think that he's going to have a disadvantage on the ground here. Especially with he's 36 years old, and he's been doing jiu-jitsu for a long time. Like, if he gets you there, he's going to know what to do. And against a guy like Green, who's still, I don't think he's young. Like, he's got like 26 fights, but he's only got 2 fights in the UFC. Like, he's only seen this level a couple of times, and now you got this guy who's insanely good. His top game's extremely good. Like, he's constantly working to pass your guard. I think you're going to see Green get outclassed here. Yeah, like I said, if Green wants to win, probably wants to keep it on his feet. That would be my guess, at least. I could be wrong. He could take him down and hold Pereira's down there and really surprise us, but I don't think it's going to happen. Next on the card, we've got women's flyweight fight, which will be, I think this is Valentina's debut at flyweight. But between Valentina Shevchenko and Priscilla Kochera, who I know absolutely nothing about, I think this is her UFC debut. I don't know if something happened where someone fell off the card and this is like a short notice fight and this girl's just willing to sub in. I know she's 8-0, has 4 knockouts, and that's it. That's all I know about her. Valentina, on the other hand, has a split decision loss to Amanda Nunes, a win over Holly Holm, and a win over Juliana Pena via armbar. So she's well-rounded, and she's also got like a 56-2 kickboxing record. So I don't know. I don't know how you don't pick Valentina in this fight. This is the easiest one on the card for me. Watch, I'll say that, and Valentina will get knocked the fuck out or something crazy. But I don't know how you bet against her. Like, to me, this is the easiest pick on the card. Like, Valentina's seen maybe the top 3 fighters in that division already and beat 2 of them. So, I mean, good luck, Priscilla. You might pull it off. Maybe she'll surprise us. Moving up, we've got a bantamweight fight between John Dodson and Pedro Munez, who is coming off a 3-fight win streak. And I might have got these 2 guys mixed up. Oh, okay. Pereira does not have 3 out of 4 wins by north-south choke. the guy that I was thinking of, he has 2 wins by North-South choke against Mads Bernal and Josh Berkman. But Pedro Munez has 3 out of 4 fights by guillotine. That's who I was thinking of. I got them mixed up. But he's done it to Rob Font, Justin Scoggins, and I don't know who he did it to before that, but I've only got the last 3 guys that he fought written down here. But anyway, he is on he's on a little tear right now. And 5 fights ago, he lost to Jimmy Rivera, which who hasn't lost to Jimmy Rivera? Jimmy Rivera might be the best fighter at 135. He's a guy that we got to figure out what's going on with him. This division, this is what I mean. I really think bantamweight is the second best division to next to lightweight. Like, the talent here is, I mean, it's insane. You got Cody Garbrandt, Dominic Cruz, TJ Dillashaw, this Pedro Munez kid, John Dodson now, Eddie Wineland, Marlon Moraes is from World Series of Fighting. I mean, John Lineker is another guy that you got to worry about. Like, he's got some heavy hands, and he's pretty good. Like, whew, there's a lot of talent floating around at 135. But yeah, Dodson's a guy who fought a lot of his career at 125, like trying to beat Demetrius Johnson, just couldn't pull it off. Lost 2 unanimous decisions to him. I think that kind of prompted him to move up to 135. But he's a guy who's got wins over some big names like TJ Dillashaw. He's got 9 knockouts, and TJ Dillashaw is one of them. It turns out as Jackson Wink, he's a southpaw, aggressive, really crisp, clean combos, like pretty good wrestler, really well-rounded. He's never been finished either. Dodson is that guy who is almost he's kind of like Uriah Faber in a way. He's that guy who is like right there, and he's just not quite there though. Like always hanging around right there. So this is a big fight for both of these guys for advancing up that ladder at bantamweight. Because like I said, a loss here could really put you back because there's so many competitive guys coming up through this weight class. Oh man, this is a tough fight to pick. Also, I think Munez is going to be a little bit bigger than Dodson in this fight. He's about, I think Pedro's about 5'6", and Dodson's little. He might not be bigger in terms of like muscle mass and stuff like that, but he's going to be just a little bit bigger, like have a little bit of advantage in the reach department, I would imagine. Munez is also a black belt in BJJ, and I mean, this is a fight that I'm taking for potential fight of the night, and it's the one that I've gone back and forth on more than anyone on the card because I could see both guys coming away with the win. Oh, man. I would expect Munez to want to take it to the ground and get on top of Dodson. You know, on this paper when I was going through doing the picks, I have Pedro circled. Like, this is who I'm going to pick, and I don't think I'm going to anymore. I think I'm going to go with Dodson. I like him to just kind of outwork him over the 3 rounds. If this was a 5-round fight, you know, I might lean a little bit more toward Munez because he is a black belt, and I think that he's got some wins and stuff in the 3rd round, I believe. But I think Dodson's a little bit too good to figure out that quick. So as the rounds wore on, I might have a little more confidence in Pedro to be able to kind of find those openings when, I mean, 125-pounders don't really get all that tired, but when they get a little tired, the openings might be there. But I think I'm going to take Dodson, maybe by knockout. He's got some power for a 135er. Like, for such a little guy, he can pack a punch. I'm going to go Dodson knockout in the 2nd round. Maybe I should just stick with my gut because, like I said, I have Pedro circled, but I think I'm going to go with Dodson. Yeah, 2nd round KO. And moving on, we are talk about finally the headliner here, the middleweight bout between Eryk Anders and Lyoto Machida. And Eryk Anders is was a linebacker for the Alabama when they went to the national title game, I think in 2009. So he's an athlete, which is good to see because, like, imagine the kind of freaks that you would have in MMA of NFL players or, like, really athletic, like, big guys like LeBron. Like, if he put all of his willpower into fighting, he'd be great at it. Like, they're just guys who are freaks, but there's more money to be made in other sports, and why do you want to get punched in the face when you can shoot a basketball for, I mean, who even knows how much more money? Maybe 10 times more money. But it's good. It is nice though when guys like this come in, like these super athletic people, like this Anders kid, because you get to see what would happen when some of these supreme athletes do go to the octagon. He's 10-0. He's got 6 knockouts. He's just coming off a decision win over Marcus Perez. But before that, he knocked out Rafael Natal and Brendan Allen. I think he's got, I don't know if he has 2 or 3 fights in the UFC. He might only have 2, but I could be wrong about that. But anyway, already got a headliner against a legend in Lyoto Machida, who, for a while, when he was coming up through the sport, I remember thinking that he was like never going to lose. He was like 16 or 17-0 or something like that before he finally lost to Shogun. But someone always finds your kryptonite, right? Like, no matter what, like, the game just evolves and someone figures it out. Like, someone will probably figure Demetrius Johnson out eventually. Maybe not, actually. He's so fucking good, he might never lose. But Lyoto's last 3 fights, all losses. So this is kind of an important fight for him. I mean, like, he's probably not going to get, like, cut from the UFC, but this is going to probably start telling him whether he needs to start going towards retirement or whether he can keep competing with young guys like Anders. His last 3 fights were against Derek Brunson, KO loss. Yoel Romero, KO loss. Luke Rockhold, submission loss. And his last win was over CB Dalloway. And that was his first fight coming off the suspension. No, I'm sorry. His first fight coming off the suspension was the KO loss to Derek Brunson, I believe. So you got to wonder where his confidence is at. And this will be his second fight coming off that suspension against a young, confident kid who's been rising up through the ranks pretty quickly. Like, had a pretty meteoric rise. And all this, like, I'm picking Anders in this fight to win by knockout because it's 5 rounds, and I think at some point, like, he's going to catch Lyoto. For me, this is a fight that Anders should win. Hype around him needs to die down a little bit. I'm taking Anders to win by, like, 2nd or 3rd round KO, I would say. I think Lyoto will be defensive enough to where he'll present some problems for Anders early, and then you'll see Anders eventually get through and get the knockout. And for Anders, this is a big win because Lyoto Machida has a pretty big name in the UFC. So it's a good win to build your fan base, get your name out there, pick up a win over a legend who's still a tough guy. Like, I know he's in trouble for the steroids or whatever, but like I said, coming off the suspension, but still a tough guy, and it's a tough fight to win. But this fight is a fight that I expect Anders to win, and it's just like the UFC is using it as a popularity booster for this new kid coming up through the ranks. I could see Lyoto winning though, like, just being patient, using some of that veteran knowledge that he has, and sitting back and being patient, kind of picking Anders apart and letting him come to him, gas himself out, because Lyoto knows what it feels like to be in a 5-round fight. Like, he was in one against Chris Weidman. Like, he's been in this situation before, like this headlining spot, whereas Anders hasn't. So that's a new element to think about too. I'm going to take Anders by, like I said, 2nd or 3rd round knockout, probably in the 3rd round. I think I'll give Lyoto enough credit that he'll get through to the 3rd, especially against a guy who's still relatively green in MMA. So I'll give him 3 rounds. But like I said, if Lyoto wants to win, I think he needs to slow the fight down and drag him into deep water that he's never been into. Anders probably needs to come out and just do what he's been doing. Like, just keep it up and wait for the shot to come, and I think it's going to at some point. But all right, that will wrap this one up. I think I talked about everything I want to talk about. Got through the news, UFC on Fox 27 recap. And yeah, let's go back through and recap the picks real quick from this, and then we'll wrap this bitch up. First fight, middleweight bout between Thiago Santos and Anthony Smith. I'm taking Thiago Santos. Key to that fight is, I think Santos has to land early, often, and then cruise, like get in cruise control. I know that might not be the best advice. Like, people might argue against that, but I really think a guy like Anthony Smith waits for you to wear yourself out and then takes advantage of it late in the fight. I'm taking Marcelo Golm over Timothy Johnson, just because Timothy Johnson seems to have, like, the bad luck bug when it comes to these new fighters, like these debuting or couple fight fighters. And this Marcelo kid is on a fucking tear. Like I said, 6 knockouts, 6-0. all in the first round. So he's a prospect to look out for in the heavyweight division. I'm taking Mikel Pereira over Desmond Green. Like I said, I think you're going to see Pereira put Desmond Green on his back, and it's going to just slice through his guard and kind of beat him up from there. I don't know if we'll get the submission or the knockout, but if I'm Green, I'm trying to stay on the feet this fight. I think that's what you're going to see. Flyweight, women's flyweight fight, we're going to take Valentina over Priscilla. And at bantamweight, Dodson's fighting Munoz. Like I said, I originally took Munoz. Now that I'm thinking about it, especially with it being a 3-round fight, I'm going to take Dodson by knockout. And then the headliner, I'm taking Anders over Lyoto. Probably by knockout, 2nd or 3rd round. Like I said, I think you'll see him be pretty aggressive, try to put Lyoto up against the cage. And if Lyoto wins, I think he needs to slow the fight down and just be crafty. You hear that a lot for veterans, right? Like, they have to be crafty, but it's kind of true. Like, you can't... These guys have so much, like, energy, and they're... Like, you have to use your experience and fight their youthfulness almost. You know what I mean? Yeah, I think Lyoto's going to get outmatched. We'll see. I'll roll one of these out next week for UFC 221, which is going to be headlined by Luke Rockhold and Yoel Romero. So we'll get one going for that. And still going to have Tanner on. He's just busy with training, competing, all that shit. I don't know when I'll get him on. It might be a week from now. It might be a month from now. But eventually we're going to do an episode strictly about jiu-jitsu. I'm excited about that one because I've got some things I want to pick his brain about. But, all right, guys, that wraps this one up. Thank you for listening, and I will catch you later.